Hey, this is Doug. Phyllis and I are chatting about the role of Lent in the age that we find ourselves living in. And Phyllis, I wanted to ask you that many of us who are thinking about what it means to be Christian in the age of emergence or in the inventive age are wanting to pursue the options of being Christian, but in the normal rhythms of our lives, in the normal parts of our world, and not under the auspices of a particular ecclesial system. For many people, even if they're part of a church or part of an ecclesial system, they want the rhythms of their lives to be the playground of their spirituality. So what advice do you have for people who aren't in a ecclesial system, that there's not a church that's going to have a clergy person or a ceremony or a series of proddings for the 40 days of Lent? What's your suggestion for how people in the daily rhythms of their lives can be connected into the ancient narrative that is the story of Lent?
If I could reach you over Skype, I'd give you a big hug,
Oh.
and that would scare you to death.
I'm ready.
Okay, all right, we will meet afterwards somewhere other than Skype.
We need a
Not
Skype
that we
hug.
haven't had a big hug ourselves several times before. You just hit, the reason I'm responding that way is you just hit what is increasingly a big theme song for me or whatever. And I think it is for many emergence Christians, especially I see it among the neo-monastic division of emergence Christianity, where there is the need to step out of the structures of church, especially church since the coming of the Reformed faith, and to some extent, even since the Great Schism and the coming of Romanized Christianity, to step out of those and go back to what is the faith without the institution. Let's be really dull and use a cliche and talk about religionless Christianity. Okay, that's what we're really talking about. Is shedding it off and getting back to the Christian experience. And that seems to condemn everything the church has done, and that's not my intention. But it is to suggest that we look at 99% of it and see whether it is productive of our souls or simply of our conduct and of our shaping as a good citizen. And the reason I was so pleased is I see things like, for instance, the Book of Common Prayer for Ordinary Radicals that Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove and Shane Claiborne have just put together, a doorstopper of a book. But it is nothing in the world but a day-by-day through the church year, the way our forefathers in the faith did it, the way St. Paul did it, the way St. Peter did it, and do it in the home. There's another book that's just come out by Gavin Long called At Home with God, which is very much like an old-timey Jewish prayer book in which the head of the house or both parents or something, day by day, engage their children at the home level with the practices of the faith, with the traditional prayers, with all of those things that were there before we became self-consciously the church, while we were still the followers of Jesus, while we were still a little outre, a lot outre, as a matter of fact. It's what, Montesquieu said a very bright thing, 200 years ago, when he said, if you want to kill a religion, let it find favor. And that's what's happened. Christianity became acceptable. And it's dangerous to be part of
a requirement.
That's socially acceptable. And so I see exactly what your question speaks to. Ways of within the home unit, within the domestic unit, or if one is single, within the domestic unit created artificially with 2 or 3 other people in a faith community, where those things, especially those 2 books I mentioned just now, actually capture and almost package and bring to you what the faith was before it required clergy or before it required all of the overlay of what we've got now. And I think it's hugely exciting. I think especially during Lent, to watch the little groups that spring up. I don't know about your area in Minneapolis, but in ours in Tennessee, you'll have little groups springing up just in bars or rather like emergent groups anyway, but that are specific to Lenten practice and to the quiet sharing of what the extra time in private prayer has revealed. And you could talk about fasting all you want to and ashes and all that, but Lent is an invitation to an intensification of prayer, too. And that probably is the fundamental definition of Lent. It is a focusing on a sustained period, the longest period in the church of sustained focus on prayer and the prayer life, which ultimately is individual exquisitely to such an extent that it becomes communal as it pushes beyond the individual ego out into the general pool, which is the church invisible and universal.
Hey, Phyllis, thanks. In our next installment, I want to ask you about Easter itself and about how we should think about the practices as we approach Easter. So, okay, that's Phyllis Tickle. I'm Doug Pagitt. Stay with us. I come back and see us again tomorrow.